what's up? It's Tati, and I'm back with another video. And this is about the Crispin Benoit situation. Today was another year where passed where he had taken his life after killing his son and his wife. And this is a topic that I never really wanted to discuss because I don't want to say I'd be biased or whatnot, but I've always had my opinion on this. And watching the Dark Side of the Ring episode, I don't want to say it changed my opinion, but it did bring in a new light as far as CTE is concerned. Um, I guess it opened my eyes more to um, what CTE can possibly make someone else do in terms of the how severe the brain damage can be, where it can make you do things that you normally wouldn't do. However, I do feel like in this case, CTE isn't to blame for everything. Throughout the actual murders, you can see that there's some level of consciousness in the way he dealt with the situation, like putting the knife under the bed and putting the Bibles near them. I know it would sound crazy about the whole Bible situation. They did talk a little bit more about how Eddie like introduced. I don't want to say necessarily religion because it probably did not make him religious, but there was Mickey was saying how he would always be saying sermons in the locker room, and he gave Chris Benoit a Bible that he seemed to have cherished because it came from his best friend and whatnot. So he ended up putting these Bibles next to Nancy and Daniel, obviously after he killed them. I feel like there was some level of consciousness because he did end up Googling a particular Bible story about Elijah where his father wanted to, I would say, resurrect him, basically asking God to bring his son back to life. And it doesn't, as it might sound like something crazy somebody would, Google, but the truth is that shows guilt. It shows that he was aware of what he did, and in the sense where he was like, the tables have turned, and he probably was asking God to bring his son back because of what he did. Obviously, his son was young, had nothing to do with this, and even if he was having issues with Nancy, like, why take her life, And in the midst of all this, your son, like, that's crazy. Honestly, me personally, I think for you to kill someone, you would have to be mentally ill at some capacity. But I feel like in some ways, he knew what he was doing, and maybe try to cover it up. I don't know. Maybe he just didn't know what to do, so planting the knife and rolling Nancy's body into a blanket or a rug or whatnot. Just it almost sounded like somebody broke in and ended up killing them. That's what almost what it looked like because from anyone's standpoint from the outside, no one's gonna just be like, oh, maybe he kills his family. Like it didn't seem like that, which is why WWE took initiative to have a whole tribute show for him. Nobody thought he was the one who did this. So for anyone in their right minds, like who would think, oh, he must have killed him? Like no way. People obviously felt like somebody broke in and killed them. You know. And for the people who were really close to Chris Benoit, they obviously didn't see this coming. Sure, Chavo and I forgot who else had gotten some weird texts that weekend, and to them it was just weird, but didn't really think anything of it because he had already said he was going to be late, that he had to take care of his family because he had food poisoning and whatnot, and it seemed credible. Like, why would they feel like anything else was going on? And unfortunately, sometimes we just don't see the signs. Sure, people saw that he was going a bit crazy, probably just maybe just depression when it came to him losing his best friend Eddie Guerrero, but no one thought it was going to go that far. Um, I remember them talking about giving him like a journal so he can write as if he was writing to Eddie, like his thoughts or whatnot. And it seemed like no one had read this book prior to all this happening, because the father did mention how they basically, when you read it, you see that it was much more than just wanting to talk to your friend, being sad by your friend. Like he mentioned seeing Eddie soon. Like he knew something was going to happen before. So like I said, there was some level of consciousness with this. Like he didn't just wake up and think that, hey, maybe I should just kill my family or whatnot. I think he probably thought of taking his own life, and something went wrong that weekend where he just ends up, involving his son and his wife. And unfortunately, I just feel like Nancy and Daniel, like, people just forget about them. Nancy was a valet, and she had a career in wrestling. Not many people know that, but even if you don't know that, why every year it's rest in peace, Chris Benoit? If you want to say it, go ahead and say it. I don't care. But with him dying, he ended up killing two other precious people who didn't deserve that. And the least I could do is mention them. And to me, like, that just makes me so upset. Like, if you know Chris Benoit died, you know exactly what the hell happened. And to me, I feel like if you are a fan and you want to idolize him, and you want to say your condolences or whatever, that's cool too. Like honestly, I feel like he was one of the best technical wrestlers that there were. I would admit that. Like I have no problem admitting that, and that's not me trying to like praise his career or whatnot. I could be truthful and say that he was a phenomenal wrestler. However, he did commit a crime where two other people lost their lives. Me personally, I think if you want to commit suicide, you should obviously talk to a professional, talk to your friends, something to get help. But if ultimately that's your choice, don't bring other people into it as far as killing them too, Like, it should have never gone that far. He Googled about, like, quickest and painless way to die by like strangulation, something like that. And I think he did that because he realized he was guilty. Like there was some level of consciousness where he realized what he had did and just thought, hey, I'm so guilty about what I did. I should take my life, but I want to do this in a painless way. So he Googled a way to do it, and he ended up hanging himself in his gym. There had to have been some points throughout that whole weekend where he's thinking about what he did, where he realizes what he did. And this is why I feel like I cannot say this was like because of CTE. Like it is a factor. I do think it is, but completely no. Like I think at some points he just knew what he was doing, felt guilty, especially when he looked about resurrecting his son. I don't think that had anything to do with him necessarily being crazy. I think that was the guilt in him that made him um, look for a religious answer. Like sometimes when something bad is going on in our lives, you don't realize this, but suddenly you're calling on to God, and this is probably something you wouldn't have done normally. It's like when you have nothing else, and suddenly you're just calling on God to help you out with something. And I think that's what it was. He was just looking for basically last resort of, he realized there was nothing he can do about him killing his son. Obviously he wouldn't be able to resurrect him, but I think he was just looking for some type of answer with looking up that Bible verse. And me personally, every time I think about it, I really do get angry because it should have never happened. Never happened. Like that particular moment could have just killed the pro wrestling industry. Like real talk, especially for WWE. Like it was so bad. The media was just taking this in all types of directions. A lot of people was using the situation for their own advantage, and really missing the point is that two people out of this, two innocent people die. Like, you just don't hear about Nancy and Daniel almost at all. And that has nothing to do with Chris Benoit being famous, because if you look back at that situation, like, you cannot erase Nancy and Daniel from the situation. So, like, that just always gets me upset when I see people not really acknowledging two innocent people in the situation. And if brain damage was the reason why all this even happened, I still feel like there's no excuse. Like, I can't just be like, he had brain damage and he killed his family. That and just be. It's like, it's not. It's just not an excuse, because that's a life. Once it's gone, it's gone. People miss Daniel. People miss Nancy. People even miss Chris. And regardless of what he did, life is so precious, and when it's gone, it's gone. And people are upset that Chris Benoit legacy won't be acknowledged, and yet the same people saying that are the same people who don't even acknowledge Nancy and Daniel in the situation. And honestly, I think it's kind of disgusting. None of that should have happened. I do feel like WWE have 100% right to feel like they don't need to talk about Benoit or acknowledge him or whatnot. And unfortunately, with that, it would be almost impossible to induct Nancy into the Hall of Fame. I feel like she should be, but it'll be almost impossible, because there's just no way you can talk about Nancy without mentioning Chris. And unfortunately, her career, her legacy is tarnished too, about something that she had almost no control over. They mentioned texts of her talking about steroids and everything, which is probably why that was heavily mentioned in the media, because she said something about the wellness policy is a joke. At the time, sure. Now I'm not even really sure. Obviously, these type of drugs are not being used right now with WWE. Um, but back then, it was just a huge thing with the steroids and all types of drugs people were taking. And the wellness policy, obviously, I think was a joke at the time. And she texted him, acknowledging that, probably because she knew he was doing drugs. So it couldn't just be CTE. Other drugs played a factor. They found cans of beers around the house in the trash cans. A lot of things played into this, and people just keep sticking to that card of mental illness. And I don't even want to get into the people who just keep talking about Kevin Sullivan. Like, that's a whole nother story. But other than that, as far as him killing his family, it was absolutely wrong. And I'm not going to tell people not to, have their positive opinions on Benoit, because I think he did make a lot of positive impacts in his life and in his career. However, sometimes just one unforgivable thing you do can tarnish every single thing you worked hard for. And unfortunately, Daniel and Nancy had to, be the sacrifice in all of this. And I hope people who do idolize Chris Benoit next time would just acknowledge Nancy and Daniel too, because their life was just as precious as his.